Yes.
Okay, we are live.
Okay. This is the, what day is it today? December 7th, regular meeting of the Board of Estimate and Taxation. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Mayor Rilling, Mr.
mayor's
Abram?
Sorry, the mayor's attending a zoning meeting. That's why he's not here.
Mr. Abrams, Ms. Brown,
Here.
Mr. Camacho,
Here.
Mr. Frayer,
Here.
Mr. Jellarat,
Here.
Mr. Kasimis.
Here.
5 present, you have a quorum.
Okay. First item on the agenda is approval of the minutes. Is there a motion?
So moved.
So moved.
Item has been moved. Any discussion? Any corrections, additions, deletions? I actually have one on page 6 near the top of page 6, before the words all in cap action requested. I think it says I commented the superintendent. It's actually commended.
Yeah, and also on page 5, Ed, they did the same thing. If you look down the paragraph starting Mr. Frayer, and it said the same thing, commended, instead of, it should be commended.
Okay. Good with that. That changed. Is there anything else? Okay, all in favor of approving the minutes as amended, signify by saying aye or raising your hands, as the case may be.
Aye.
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 Opposed, abstentions?
I abstain. I wasn't here.
Okay, already abstains. The motion carries. There is no special.
I have a question. Do we have a secretary on the line
Good question.
taking minutes?
I
Angela?
think Telesco, sometimes she watches the recording. But she did get an invitation. The invitation was on the Zoom invitation.
Yes.
So how do we confirm that she's on or not on?
It doesn't look like she's on, but she does view the recordings.
Oh, after the fact. I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's
Yeah.
good.
Angela, let me make a comment on that real quick. That could be problematic because we talked about it earlier, the Oak Hills Authority tried to do that also. And for some reason they had technical difficulties and they didn't record the meeting and the minutes couldn't be taken because they didn't record, the person was waiting till afterwards. So it might be a good idea for somebody to be on on these calls.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can reach out. I'll reach out to her and let her know that it would be safest for her to attend the meetings.
Just in case.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we'll proceed as if there aren't going to be any technical difficulties with this recording.
Can we review who the abstentions were?
Me.
Artie Kasimis was.
Just me.
was the
Just
abstention.
already. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
All right. There's nothing on the special appropriations agenda, section A. There is a transfer agenda item, page 9. Ms. Fogel, would you like to speak to that?
Yes. This transfer is so the health department can hire a part-time epidemiologist, and Lamont Daniels is on, so he can explain that further.
Okay. Lamont?
Hi, good evening, everyone. Again, good to see you all. So as you all know, we are in this pandemic and in consultation with the health department, and based on our current needs, we're seeking funding to hire an epidemiologist. As you know, an epidemiologist is a scientist, a public health professional that really helps us look at disease outbreaks using a statistical analysis, which is way beyond what I know how to do. For those that receive Mayor Rilling's daily updates, this is the individual that is looking at the numbers, looking at the neighborhoods, so we can really identify where the outbreaks are happening and how to best respond. So this is funding for a part-time, for a 6-month position. And in speaking with our health director, we just received word that with this investment from the state, with this investment from the city, the state will be able to support us. So we'll actually be able to extend this person's position. And I hope you all will agree with me that beyond 6 months, I think we're still going to need an epidemiologist to help us understand the pandemic, and especially in light of the vaccine. So this person will really take on a leadership role to assist us and bring another level of bench strength to the team as we continue to deal with the pandemic. It's ever changing, it's ever understanding. The CDC have guidelines, the DPH have guidelines, so we're asking for support to bring on epidemiologists. And it's consistent with other health departments our size and population our size to really help us look at these issues from a scientific perspective.
I've got two questions. Is there a person in mind already, number one, and number two, are we receiving matching funds from the state for this person? Or what's the state involvement in this?
Yes, we definitely have. We definitely have. I think the mayor was able to give us permission to begin hiring for this individual. So yes to that question. And two, it's not matching, but in my opinion, working with the state and working with other municipalities, I believe it was more palatable to let the state know that we're committing dollars in to help us support this role moving forward in our city. And Deanna was able to secure additional funding to extend this position beyond the 6-month investment the city was putting in.
But is the funding the equivalent of the 44,000 that you're requesting, or is it something else?
I can't hear you. Say it one more time.
Is the funding the same as the 44,000 that the state would be putting in, or is it something else?
Yes, so 44,000 will cover 6 months. The state will be adding additional 44 to make this a year position.
Okay.
Is this person going to be on retainer, or are they going to be in the office?
Oh, it definitely. Oh, and we need this person in the office.
Yeah, I like the idea of it, but why not a full-time position? This is the time for a full-time, wouldn't you think?
You could, well, if you think we should be full-time, and I would support that as well.
I mean, if we're ever going to need a full-time person for
Yeah.
this,
I think this is a person,
I
as I understand,
I don't get the part-time nature of it, but
as I understand Lamont, what Lamont's saying is that this person is going to be reviewing data and providing advice. I don't know that they will be doing that 8 hours a day. Is that?
Oh, most certainly. I mean, there actually will be administering and facilitating the entire database in terms of our contact tracing. So right now, you know, we've all stepped up to the plate. And so this really allows us to focus and to continue to focus on the other things, specifically the vaccine. So this person will be taking a considerable amount of weight off of the current staff structure that we have. So it's more than just data, it's more than its analysis. This individual will really help us understand and actually be that point person liaison for the state, as there's many requests and reports that are required on a daily basis as we continue to monitor the support.
It's not 8 hours a day though, right? Because you're asking for a part-time position.
I'm sorry, when I meant part-time, this is a 6-month position. With this funding, the state is going to match it for additional 6 months. So this is a full-time position.
So you can hire an
But you mean the city is
epidemiologist for
funding?
$44,000?
I can't hear you.
You can hire an epidemiologist for $44,000?
44,000 will be the first 6 months, and then
Oh, so it's
This-
88,000.
exactly. I'm sorry. I wasn't clear on that.
Okay, gotcha.
and this is a doctor. This will be a doctor position. I mean, a person that has a medical degree, or
Yes, this is definitely a master's level with experience in epidemiologist. It's not. This is not this particular person does not hold a doctorate degree, but the credentials are consistent with the epidemiologist.
all right. So it's a full-time person for 6 months, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay, I have no.
I'm sorry, I didn't make that clear. I think I did say part-time.
Well, it says part-time
think-
in section B. It says this transfer will fund a part-time person in the health department. So I don't know.
This is a
if it-
full-time 6 months, then, okay, I didn't get a chance to see that. So
I think-
a 6 months position that the city will be invested and the state will match that to make that a full-time position for the additional 6 months. So we'll be able to have this person on board for a full year.
Yeah, I think you were just saying that the city was going to pay for half
Correct.
of year of the full-time salary.
Thank you.
Correct.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I didn't
Right.
make that clear.
Yeah,
Okay.
I got you.
Okay, any more questions?
Yeah, is it true that other cities have a similar position?
Yes, sir. In fact, when we've created our position, other cities who are now looking at the role, the critical role, I would say, of an epidemiologist often have even used our job description, but certainly other health departments in other cities our size have had or have an epidemiologist on board in their health
So
department.
are we more or less leading the way here, or are we following some of the other big cities?
I would say
I
a
just-
combination.
Okay. Okay, great.
Any other questions?
Nope.
Is there a motion? Was there a motion to consider this transfer? I don't
I'll
think
make a
there was.
motion.
Okay, motion's been made.
Artie, I'll make a motion.
Okay, so Artie makes the motion. Discussion has been had. All in favor of the transfer?
Aye.
Saying
Aye,
Opposed?
much needed.
Good idea.
Abstentions?
Thank you very much.
Right, the motion
Thank
carries.
you.
There is no special capital appropriation. There is other business, the Oak Hills financial status. Oh, no other business, but then there's additional information section. And this is Oak Hills. Is that why Joe's on?
That is.
Hi, Joe.
You have the floor.
Thanks. At Oak Hills, it's, I'm pleased to be able to report that it's kind of more of the same of what we've had in the past couple of months. Rounds are up, and that's driving revenue to be quite good. And we're keeping our expenses in check. The reports on a monthly basis will start to get much less interesting for the next couple of months because our rounds really go down. And at some point we will decrease to winter rates, which are kind of in the $20 to $30 range versus our normal rate card. Those are our lean months. There's snow on the ground. There's not people golfing. So much less interesting, as I mentioned, but we're not quite there yet. October was a good month. The deep financials are in the packet. I do have an early read on November, which I think is always more interesting. November is the first of the leaner months, or at least it has been typically. It wasn't this year, which is why I say more of the same. The demand was proven out again. The weather was good, at least good enough for some people to go play golf. This is an unaudited preliminary number, but revenue prior year for November was in the 50,000 range, and it was about 100. It's going to be, when all financials are done, in the $125,000 range. So about 150% increase in revenue. Expenses are up 2%. I don't have to say that that's good. Our cash balance, last year we had about $8,000 in the bank, and this year we have $375,000 in the bank. The reason we were able to get to $8,000 in the bank last year is that we borrowed $20,000 from our line of credit, and we have not borrowed anything from our line of credit through today even. And we have no intention to until that $375,000 in the bank is significantly diminished. We've made since July, well, not since July, but based on July rounds, we've made just above $50,000 in payments to the city on the $2 per revenue round schedule. I do want to mention that we are late. I guess we're technically in arrears on our annual repayment to the city, which is based on 1% of gross golf revenue. And that's to be paid when we have audited financials. Well, it's actually supposed to be paid on November 1st, but it's supposed to be of audited gross golf revenue. So I've sent an email to Henry, actually, just saying, hey, we can just make a payment of estimated gross golf revenues, 1% of estimated, and true it up or not if it's an overpayment. That, it's not going to be by a significant amount, because we don't expect our audit to identify any material weaknesses in the financials, especially on the gross golf revenue side. So I think he's still deciding on that. So we'll see where that ends up. It'll get paid eventually. It's just the timing of it that's in question. Like I said, that financial audit is a little delayed, but we don't see anything concerning. It's in the final review. So the partner review has already happened. It's quality control at this point. So we expect it soon. It's just not ready yet.
How much is that payment going to be, Joe?
I'm sorry, that was very quiet.
How much would that payment be?
About 15,000.
15,000?
Yeah, 15. Yeah. And just, I think today we put the check in the mail for a $6,000 payment based on November rounds. So that's included in the 50 and a half, but the 15 would be incremental to the 50,000 that we've already paid. For the first time in a very long time, we're doing something that's in our charter, which is to deliver a preliminary budget by January 1st to the city. And that would be for the fiscal year that starts July 1st, 2022. I don't think that there's a time that's really too early to start planning for that. It's rough. It's high level numbers. It's not going to actually be our budget in the end, but it's going to be indicative of what strategic vision we have for the course for 2022, for the park for 2022. So I wanted to just kind of highlight that. That is something that, we should kind of keep our eyes peeled for. And then, finally, before I open it up for any questions that anyone has, we're going to go through our pricing schedule at our public hearing meeting, December, oh gosh, I've lost the date, next Thursday. I think it's the 17th. That's going to kind of be a reset for our rate card. We're seeing some modest increases that we're going to put through on greens fees, some increases on cart fees. But overall, the goal is that we have to kind of keep this revenue going in the right direction. It's not going to be drastic increases for anywhere except for we're going to see some more hefty percent-wise increases on season passes. These are the new passes, kind of the unlimited, play as much as you want. Some are limited to just weekdays, but those sorts of packages that people buy for an upfront charge and can play throughout the season. We're going to see some increases there because our analysis indicates that the discounts that we were giving on a per round basis based on the usage that occurred this year was a little too rich for our liking. We weren't giving the course away by any means, but it was a pretty deep discount that we don't think we need to be at based on a little bit of local benchmarking. These packages are not very common, but based on what we've been able to glean from the local market, we're a little bit underpriced, especially for the product that we think we have at Oak Hills. So we're going to put some increases there. And that'll be, proposed and open for comment at the December meeting. So, along with, where we are on expenses, which we've been able to keep down, where we've been able to get to on revenues, and, these modest revenue increases, we think we're going to move into 2021 and fiscal year 22, beginning July, in a pretty good position to really be able to make some much needed capital improvements to the course.
What do you think has accounted for such a dramatic turnaround in terms of, let's say, revenue, monies on hand as compared to last year? Is that sustainable? Do you plan on that being the case more or less going forward?
I think so. We are going to need to put through some increases in grounds maintenance, to keep a golf course going at the level that we want Oak Hills to be at. You may be able to cut some corners for 1 year, maybe for 2 years. You keep going and you keep cutting the corners, and it really starts to get a little bare. Literally, the grass won't grow, right? So there's some maintenance projects that we need to do to be able to make sure that our irrigation systems are in place, our drainage systems are in place. And then there's just some spend that we need to do on things like ag and chem, grass seed, just the usual upkeep things that we won't be able to neglect year over year, year after year. But we have been able to keep expenses down from a personnel perspective. We've been able to keep some of that course maintenance down. Some of that's going to have to bounce back. Bottom line is people have a little bit more time. I've been thinking about this a lot, but nationally golf is up. I've spoken about this in other forums, and I think in this forum, that golf is up nationally. People want to get outside and they want to do it in a responsible way. Golf affords that possibility. And then, the other thing that I don't think I've really mentioned before, but as I'm reading more and thinking a little bit more, especially even about my life, is, personally, I don't have a 40-minute one-way commute anymore. I'm able to maybe if my last meeting's at 3, I would be able to pop out to the golf course and go play around, when it's dark at 8, right? So I think that also kind of contributes to things. People have a little bit more time flexibility, or they have this season, that allows them to take the 5-6 hours out and go play golf, go enjoy a round of golf.
But isn't the weather a big factor too?
Well, yeah.
I mean,
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I've mentioned that, we blame it when it's bad. We should give the weather the credit when it's really good. It was dry, which is really good for golfers, not so great for grass. But that's grass doesn't pay the revenue, so the golfers pay the revenue. So we've been seeing the rounds there.
I think you can also anticipate that there's going to be a change in how we do business after COVID. That we've discovered that we don't need to be present at every meeting, so that you're going to factor some of that into people's availability to play golf going forward.
Yeah. I think there will be some sustained level there, but I think it will snap back a little bit.
Ed, this is Troy. Just a couple of questions, Joe. Joe, thanks for this information. You've been great since you've been handling this, the numbers, a little better presentation. Thank you. And I played a lot this summer. I took advantage of the unlimited plan. That was $1,400. Do you have an idea of what that's going to move to? What you're thinking about there? Because you got to think about what the break even for most people is. So
totally, and that's exactly the analysis. So we're trying to move the break even a little bit higher. I don't have the exact numbers yet. The proposal's not finalized. What we're doing now more is the staff is making the proposals for these management decisions, which pricing really is, and they're presenting it to the board for our approval. So I have a little bit of insight, but I know that they're still fine tuning, still 10 days out from the actual meeting. But I can tell you, if you want to do it again next year, you're going to be paying a little bit more. It's probably somewhere in the 20% more range. Sorry, for that particular item.
Yeah, I definitely thought 1,400 was a little light. $40 is the break even you should be using, I think, for non-seniors. And obviously you're going to play more. The reason was so much play was because a lot of people had the unlimited and they want to take advantage of it. So you're going to see more action there. That's another reason. But you got to be careful with that number, because the market will tell you very quickly if it's too high. So
yes. Oh yeah.
The other thing is, I wanted you to talk about, or someone they talk about, the restaurant situation. I just found out that they're leaving. I've been asking all summer, and everyone said they've been fine. Everything was current with them. I thought they did a good job under the COVID situation. What happened there? I understand they weren't offered the opportunity to come back at least for another year. Is that true?
Yeah, and it's really strategic, and it's driven a lot, but really by two things: the kind of management culture that we want to have amongst the staff, and revenue. Right? It's not a huge element of our revenue, the restaurant, but it is one element. And I don't want to get into specific numbers. You can see it in the financials where we were trending for the year and where that would extrapolate out to. But we did not think, when we look at other comparable municipal courses with a restaurant facility, that we were getting quite market rate, and we didn't think that we would actually kind of be able to realize that market rate under this structure. And so that's why I speak part about revenue, so that's the revenue part, and part about management culture, which is where we've taken a strategic decision. I can't express to you how much I regret that the last meeting was not, for some reason, was not recorded. We don't have control over that once we went over to the city platform. But we did go over a little bit of a different management structure where we're going to have a general manager in place which will basically be hired by the board and manage not just the the folks who are already in place, but also contracts, right? So food services contracts. They'll be managing the tennis contract as well, right? So they'll be able to have a more participatory role in making sure that that facility is being used as it should, and in a way that maximizes the revenue opportunity for the park and the city. This is somewhat akin to the position that was in place, although maybe I think 3 or 4 years ago, before my time on the authority. But we think that it's the right approach to take now, given that we kind of have a diversified food services. We have a bunch of different contracts with tennis and a couple of other things that need to be managed under one roof by one person. So it's kind of moving in two directions, and kind of having that structure for the restaurant doesn't work into that goal. I will say a general manager may come in and say that this is the way you should do it. The way it was being done is the way that you should do it. You should just make some tweaks around here. At that point, if we go to an RFP, anyone who responds to the RFP for the restaurant contract will be considered very fairly.
Joe, my only comment there is, listen, this is a COVID year. Restaurants are closing every day. You had a tenant there. He was the only guy I understand that responded to the RFP last year. I mean, I don't know. I hope. Unless you know something we don't, somebody's looking to get in the restaurant business during this period. I would have been happy if we just kept them in for another year, but maybe you guys are on top of this, but we'll see very closely what's going to happen here. But I was kind of disappointed that at least we couldn't look to see one more year with this guy in this environment. I hear what you say about going forward, but I mean, it's crazy times. But we'll see what's going to happen.
Joe, I'm sorry, but I don't know all the members of the board. Do any of them have any experience in managing clubs or luncheon clubs or college clubs or anything like that are in business today?
Yeah, so I'll speak about two members in particular. One has significant organizational design experience, not necessarily in this club atmosphere, but throughout several different industries. And we do have one person on the board, a recent ad about a year in, I think about a year in, who is in the restaurant business, has a couple of going concerns in the restaurant business and more within his family, and has been at it for, I think, 10, 15 years successfully. So a lot of what we're doing is that kind of after these two folks have been able to stare at what's going on, look at the operations even, and make recommendations about how we should tweak and change.
Okay, good.
Anything else? All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Androsco, for that report.
Thank you.
Ed, did you have any more? I mean, I just have a comment on, is Lisa on the phone regarding her letter? I was just curious.
Lisa is not on.
Oh, she's not? Okay. All right.
All right, so we're
We'll
gonna
catch up with her on that then.
So now we have the informational portion, the other from the city side, financials. Is that year-to-date capital budget, operating expenditure report, operating revenue report, etc. Is there either Henry or Angela would like to speak on that?
I'm not sure if Henry wants to, excuse me, speak about capital. I know Henry and Chitsame have been working on detailed cash flow reports. I can talk about the operating, but Henry, do you want to talk about capital first?
Why don't you start with operating? That'll be fine.
Okay. So if you go down to the next section that starts at page 32, you'll notice the percent used. So you could quickly look at, we're about 42% through the year. So if you scanned through all the departments, everyone is right on target. There are a couple anomalies like registrar, which is understandable because they just went through a lot of work with the election results, but that will fall off too. So they should come in within budget. So I don't see anything on the operating side that is alarming, and all of the departments seem right on track.
Okay. Thank you for that. Are there any questions? All right. How about the capital budget, Henry?
I would say the numbers that I see for the capital budget this year look fine. My bigger concern is looking at the limits of our borrowing capacity. I think I mentioned this last spring when we were finishing up the budget. There are certain rules and requirements we have to comply with, one of which is you're not allowed to borrow tax exempt money for too long a period. So I can't just borrow hundreds of millions of dollars and sit on it until we spend. The IRS would find us in violation. At the same time, I can't borrow too little. I have to have the cash available when people need to spend it. So what Chitsame and I do now quarterly is we go out to all of the department heads and we say, here are your active budgets. And it shows, here's your budget, here's the expenses to date, here's the expected reimbursement you might get, which is very important when we deal with net spending. What are your estimated cash flows quarterly for the next 2 years? And we do that on a rolling basis. So that way I can gauge how much we can borrow to make sure we have sufficient in a timely manner for the expenditures without having too much surplus sitting here, which might cause an IRS problem. So when I started doing that analysis, I saw that we have many, many authorized projects that have been approved for which we did not bond yet. And when I add up all of the bonding that we have to do just to get up to speed with the existing projects, not even the ones in this year's capital budget, we're out of room. Based on the discussions I've had with Bill Lindsay of Hilltop Securities, our financial advisor, we it's about $120 million more borrowing capacity before we start bumping up against the ceiling for our AAA bond rating. It's not a hard and fast rule. It's one of several factors that the rating agencies look at. What's your absolute borrowing? What's your ratio of debt service expenses to your total operating expenses? So the good news is what I'm borrowing these days is at a very low rate. So the debt service is not as high as if, let's say, it was 5 or 7% interest. Having said that, we keep increasing the absolute amount of our borrowings and our debt. So the debt service as a percentage is going up. And I don't want to tell you that if we increase our operating expenses faster, that ratio goes down. That's not the way to solve the problem. It's the numerator. What we have to do is watch how much new debt we're adding. And then there's that absolute debt number. So I'm going to talk to the mayor about how he wants to handle it. What I'd like to see is a review, just like on the city level, we had the opportunity with the early retirement plan. It gave us an opportunity to look at the staffing in every department, look at the retirements, look at the vacancies, and decide can the responsibilities of, let's say, someone who retired be allocated to existing personnel, and then we can save a body? Or if someone retired and they had been here for 30 years and now we're going to replace them, maybe we have a promotion internally and we end up replacing the person with a junior person who's starting off their career. So it gave us a chance to look at all the tasks we're doing and who's doing it, a real human resources analysis. And I'm just proposing that maybe we do the same thing on the capital side, where we re-examine all of these projects. Maybe some of them, given the very tough circumstances, especially due to COVID, we eliminate the project. Maybe we slim down the project. Maybe we stretch the project over a longer period of time. We can't do it all in the next 5 years, but if we stagger it, we might be able to fit it under our umbrella of borrowing. Because what I need to do is we're going to be pretty tight on the cash we borrow. So we only have so much cash. But if everybody who was authorized to spend, spent, we're out of cash. And I'm just going to have to say, sorry, we don't have any more bond money to spend this year. You have to wait till next year. That's not the way to prioritize. I'd rather actively look at all the projects, determine who goes first, how much everybody gets, and plan it so that we can maximize which projects we do, when we do them, the timing, the financing, and make sure it all fits together. So I'll say it again. This year, we look to be doing fine, but for the capital budget, which we're going through now, for the budget year 2021 to 2022, I think it might be wise to start looking at the details of all the capital projects.
What's the percentage of education of a school construction, let's say, or school, renovations relative to the rest of the budget? Is it a 50%? Is something less or more?
Let me give you a sense. At a very big picture, if I had to borrow all the bonds today for all of the projects that are out there, I would have to borrow about $270 million. Of that, 165 is Board of Ed. 105 would be the city. And of the 105 in the city, 73 would be DPW. Now, buried in those, I really have to give a little caveat. There's always a complexity. Buried in those numbers are the Parking Authority and the WPCA. The WPCA and the Parking Authority have their own bonding capabilities because as authorities, they set their fees on the assumption that they will break even and cover the debt service. And when the rating agencies look at them, when they come to borrow money, they say, have they financed their operations on their own without the city helping them for the last 3 years? And since that has been yes, their ratings don't affect the city. And in fact, the last bond issue we did this year in September was an add-on of $20 million, 18 and a half of which was for the WPCA, which I have no concerns that they could always set their fees and get that money. And $1.5 million is the Parking Authority. Parking Authority is facing some real challenges. Everyone related to transportation, whether it's mass transit or parking, is having a severe impact because of COVID. But we're talking about borrowing. We borrowed $1.5 million for them. Their needs are much smaller than the WPCA. I'm really not worried. So again, we're in a pretty good shape. But that's the only caveat on their numbers. But it gives you a sense. Board of Ed is approximately 2/3 of our debt. And of the city side, DPW is about 3/4, just if you were doing ballpark.
Gotcha. Any other questions? Any questions in connection with that?
Do you have any good ideas as to how much we're talking about if you look at those kind of stagnant projects that we've committed to but haven't spent anything on yet?
Well, many of them we've already started. So it's not, these aren't going to be easy decisions. The problem is it's not just financial. It's financial, operational, and political. It's an investment in the city. When we invest in education, isn't that a wonderful thing? We get a return on education. Our schools are better. We attract families, we attract businesses, all those good things. So it's an investment decision. I would say I'm an expert on the financial side. I am one of the least knowledgeable. When you look at 250 projects and the trade-offs, forget about citywide, just within each department.
Mhm.
So, you know, Anthony Carr could tell you, okay, I've got 25 DPW projects. Here's how I rank them. Here's what's critical. Here's what I need now. Here's what I can push off. And Angela and I go through that with every department as we go through their budgets. And they give us priorities and we force rank them. But tell me, is DPW's number 3 project more important than police number 1? Where do you get those trade-offs? Do you do the ones that are small dollars to save some money? But the police department, last year, we approved a $16 million upgrade of the radio system, which Karen Del Vecchio told me a good analogy is we're going from analog to digital. Okay, welcome to the 21st century. You got to find room for it. So to me, it's a jigsaw puzzle and it's 3-dimensional. 1 dimension is finance. I will analyze and give you my best advice and suggestions financially, but then it becomes you good people, the BET, the commission, the mayor, who really understands the trade-offs of the city and says, here's what we're going to do. Some of it is, look, this is important, but we can't do it now, maybe down the road. And
Is there, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, go on.
no.
Are there consultants out there that we might entertain coming in and doing that specific analysis for us that have done it for other cities? I'm not quite sure. I know in the municipal area that of any consultants that would do something like that.
I think what Henry's suggesting is that there's a political component to it that really, I don't know that anyone who's not intimately familiar with the city and that part of the running of government could really advise us on. I think Henry's perfectly capable of telling us what the finances look like and what his best advice is. But I don't know that, I think it's really our job, I think, as Henry suggested, to decide, you know, for instance, a moratorium, is that something on capital expenditures or on new capital expenditures for 2, 3, 4 years? Is that something that will right this problem?
Well, but you see, I worry about blanking, you know, it's when you get to blanket rules like that. I've done that in turnaround situations where a county executive says no more hiring, no more capital expenditures. And it's really a heavy hand because as we saw when we did the analysis of personnel, there are certain positions, you know, Karen Del Vecchio, head of IT, is retiring. Would you say, sorry, we're not replacing just because we're not replacing now? You have to use judgment. So, James, let me react on a 3-dimension cube, okay? 1 dimension is finance. Ed, 1 dimension is politics. Maybe there's a 3rd dimension called operations. And there are experts out there who say, you know what? You want to keep investing in your roads. You want to pave a certain amount every year. You may want to cut back, but you may want to pave every year. You don't want to fall behind on IT. And it just so happens we're in the process of an RFP for an efficiency study with consultants who are going to look at every department in the city and the Board of Ed. So while they're here, we may say to them, by the way, we have this issue about our capital projects, and we wouldn't mind picking your brains and getting your ideas. What have you seen at other municipalities? But I think in the end of the day, you're absolutely right. The elected and volunteer people who serve the city have to make those tough decisions. And like in a good negotiation, if everybody's a little unhappy, then you probably did the right job.
And I don't disagree with that at all. But I think that, you know, politics is not a black and white situation. You know, we could all look at it from a little bit different angle and come up with a different conclusion. But I think you know, we would like to have somebody that's impartial to take a look at it and say, you know, from the financial side, I think we can rely on you seriously, you know, without a doubt. Operational, I think if we do have a consultant come in that's going to give us some kind of opinion on the operations that we have and savings that we could possibly achieve, yes, that's good too. But and I endorse the idea of having them look at this area and let us, you know, give us the alternatives that we're faced with. And then you layer on top of that your political balancing that you have to do, because it could be, you know, to say that we're going to, you know, cut the Board of Ed budget in half would be suicide for everybody. That's just crazy. You know, you wouldn't do that. But I mean, we have to have the other elements in front of us organized in order to make that political decision whether we want to go ahead and spend more money or cut expenses someplace else.
Can I
Hi,
make
Henry.
Yes, go on, Angela.
I just wanted to make one comment that every department does have a master plan, and those are updated about every 5 years. And the intersection of those on the capital side is supposed to be the POCD. I don't know if that will be a help to that process. It may be if at least a starting point, because there are a lot of consultants that are doing those things with the master plans and the POCD. And the POCD was just updated.
You know, as I recall.
Hi, this.
Yeah, go on, Sherry. Sorry.
I have a question. So, Henry, with the numbers that you gave us for the capital budget for the school, does that include grant money? Because I know quite often the state will have school construction grant fund available. And also, does that include any kind of technology? Because given the pandemic, you know, the district is depending so much on technology, and I'm wondering if there's anything in there for that as well. Maybe there's not anything needed, but I was just wondering about those two things.
Very good point. Let me just read the line item I have for the Board of Ed. The revised budget, which means the total spending, is $441 million. We've spent $78 million to date, which leaves $363 to be spent, but we also expect $198 million in reimbursement. Now, there are always complications. The reimbursements on one level, we may spend the money in month one, the bill gets submitted for payment, and then it gets submitted for reimbursement, and Hartford may not get us the money for 3 or 4 months. I finance that cash flow, okay? When we're only earning, 50 basis points on our money, it's cheap money, but it is a cost. Number two, I've been warned by Alan Lowe and Jim Giuliano that when the state says we're reimbursing you 33%, first of all, they withhold 12% during the construction process for withholding. And then after they audit, which could be 6 or 7 years after the commencement, after the construction, they may say, we're not covering this. This item isn't an approved expense, blah, 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 blah. And if I look at total cost versus how much they give us, instead of being 33%, it may really be 28%. So there are a lot of moving pieces and estimates involved in this. So when I said that bonds needed to be issued 165, that's gross minus what we've already spent, even encumbered funds. Normally you're cut your budget, but as Chitsmay pointed out, but the cash isn't out the door yet. So we have to use up that with encumbrances, and then expected reimbursements. And some of that probably will not come through, and it may be 5-7 years down the road, but that's sort of the best estimate. And I try to do that for each department on an equal basis to just get a ballpark of how much we're going to need.
As I recall, Henry, about 3 years ago, when we approved the capital budget for the schools, I think there was a projection that we were going to bump up against that ratio that we can't, a debt to operating.
The Debt
the-
service to the operating expenses.
Right, and then, so we're gonna go, perilously close to that no, and then it was projected to come down in year, whatever it was, 8 or 10 or something like that. Is that still, is that your understanding, and is that still the case?
I don't think that's still the case. I think we're bumping up against that debt service to operating expense ratio now. One of the rating agencies noted that we were at about 8.5% and our maximum is 10, but that's because they used the calculation that worked in our favor. If we use our conservative numbers, we're already above 9%, okay? And we may violate that ceiling before we hit the ceiling of the 400 million. So we're getting into that territory. And it might have been a case, if I understand looking at some records and having spoken to people who were here, that the Board of Ed had said, oh, we're going up, but then it's going to come down. And every year they said the same thing, operating budget and capital budget. And then I think with Senator Duff and Norwalk High School, that really wasn't on the program when those calculations were made a couple of years ago.
But it wasn't.
So that's why, but you have to be opportunistic.
Right.
So that's why I think I don't see it coming down. And that's why we have to aggressively look at the spending now, because on a natural basis, we may go beyond. And it might have been in those days, it looked like we had the budget and we could do all these things, but the world has changed. We have COVID, we have uncertainty with our tax base, with the economy. So therefore, I'm flashing a yellow caution that says, let's not wait for a crisis 3 years from now. Let's start examining it now and make the adjustments. So we may have projects that we want to do, but because of priorities, we may have to push it off. Okay? Yes, things are old, but they're still working, they're still operating, and maybe we do it 5 years from now. And that way we sort of fit all of the projects into an umbrella ceiling of what we can do. Now, if we have increased growth, if we have businesses coming in, new buildings, a larger grant list, we could tax more, then we might be able to afford more capital projects. I mean, it's many, many moving pieces, but we could definitely address the spending side. And then if the economic and revenue side improves, then we can loosen it up.
Henry, do you have any analysis that will show us exactly what you're talking about now, that we can see graphically where that's bouncing on, what the trajectory is?
I'm reviewing it with the mayor now, and with his approval, I will share it appropriately. Okay, I'm not ready to share it. I want to make sure the numbers are right and it's presented in the way that he wishes. So I would say I'm not ready yet.
Okay, that's fine. But I think I thank you for bringing this up. It gives us something to think about.
Yes, thank you.
Anything else? Okay,
Not for me.
okay, so
I
we're,
move to adjourn.
yes, thank you. Who was that, James? James moves to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you all. Have a good
Thank you.
holiday, everyone.
Good
Yeah, everyone.
holidays. Stay
Yep.
safe. Thank
Yeah,
you.
same.
Bye.
Bye.